I have to give you an update on this guy who I know appears on this live stream every week. But this is Ryan Walters. He's the superintendent of public instruction in Oklahoma. He's kind of the czar of education, and he thinks he's the king of the world. But there is some good news this week because, as I have talked about many times in the past, this guy has been trying to indoctrinate children in Christianity, indoctrinate school children in Christianity for years now. And he has done that by trying to push the Trump Bible in public school classrooms. But more recently, the thing he has done, and which I talked about, is that he has tried to change the social studies standards, the things you have to teach kids from grades kindergarten through 12th grade. He's tried to teach them election denial. He's tried to teach that Christian nationalism played a role in the founding of our country. And that's kind of the big way he's been trying to shove his faith into schools. And let me tell you specifically, I'll give you a reminder of what he tried to do with those standards. He released the new standards in December of last year. And you have to post them online because the public has to have a chance to weigh in on them. And so he did that, and people were furious. This is where you saw headlines last year about, like, he's trying to show that the 2020 election had major discrepancies. It did not. He said in there that there were security risks with mail-in ballots and sudden batch dumps. There were not. He also said COVID originated in a Chinese lab. There was no conclusive proof of that. I think he also said in December he was calling it the Gulf of America, which is one of those just dumb Trumpy things. And those standards removed items that required schools to teach about racial discrimination and Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. He just yanked those out of the standards. So he released that in December. People were furious. And then in February, the Board of Education needed to vote on those standards. But something had changed at this point. The governor of Oklahoma, who is a Republican, who is a MAGA guy, but who also doesn't like Ryan Walters because nobody likes Ryan Walters, he appointed some new members of the school board. And you would think, and I'm sure the governor thought this, Kevin Stitt, I think he thought they're going to reject these standards and be a thorn in the side of Ryan Walters. Well, when they get to that meeting to vote on these standards, Ryan Walters, the day before, says, hey, you guys, here's the latest version of the standards. There have been some edits made. And these people are like, dude, the standards are like that thick. We can't read it all tonight and then vote on it. We need some time. And Ryan Walters is like, too bad, you got to vote on it now because the legislature has to approve this stuff really soon. So you got to vote on it today. And so they voted on it and they decided to approve it, even though they had not read it. And after they voted on it, people finally got to see these new revised standards, and they realized he had made even more changes on his own. Ryan Walters, without alerting the public, he had gone ahead and just written in some other stuff. And what did he do? He made it super religious too. Like, there was already religion in the December standards, but now it is saying it's treating the Bible as a foundational document. It's turning religious mythology into historic fact. It cited Judeo-Christian ideals in supporting colonial demands for independence, as in the founding of America was built on Judeo-Christian standards. It wanted kids to learn about the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. It wanted students to explain how the U.S. Constitution was, quote, influenced by religion, morality, and the Bible. So it was as if David Barton, the Christian pseudo-historian, like, influenced the entire damn thing. So this is what we found out after the State Board of Education had already said yes to this stuff. Now, the Republican legislature could have chimed in and said, we are rejecting these standards, go back to the drawing board and rewrite them. But because they are Republicans, they're like, you know what? Let's just do nothing. It'd be a lot easier to do nothing. And so here's where we were at. Those new standards, The election denial, pro-Jesus everywhere standards were now in place. And starting now, this school year, this is what public schools in Oklahoma had to teach their kids. So that's where we were at. Now, when that became the story here, that, oh shit, all these schools have to teach this, there were two different lawsuits filed. One of them was filed by Americans United for Separation of Church and State and a group called the Oklahoma Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. And their lawsuit said, besides the fact that this is misinformation and religious indoctrination, they also pointed out Ryan Walters violated the state's Open Meeting Act when he urged the school board to pass this stuff without ever letting the public see the revised standards, because he was supposed to show the public this stuff first. He also lied to those school board members when he said, you need to vote on these standards now. In fact, they had 2 more months when they could have waited to vote on this stuff. And also, the lawsuit said the standards violated a rule that says the material has to be accurate and age appropriate. Well, they were definitely not accurate, some of the things. So, as I pointed out in a different video not that long ago, since that time, the lawsuit was working its way through the courts. Publishers have basically fought back against this too. Some of the biggest textbook publishers in the country have said, we are not rewriting our history standards to inject bullshit into it just to satisfy Oklahoma. You're not a big market for us. So we're not ruining our reputation because Oklahoma wants books that lie to kids. Like, not only is it not cost effective, it's bad for our brand. So the textbook publishers are not going along with it. But that leaves school districts in a bind. What do you do if you're a school district right now? You could ignore the new standards entirely, because guess what? Before the 2024 Ryan Walters bullshit standards, there were the 2019 social studies standards that were basically fine. They're like, well, we could use those, but if you do that, you risk having Ryan Walters come after you and defund your school district and punish you in some way, which he loves to do because he thinks he's a king. You could move forward with the new Ryan Walters bullshit standards and then have teachers offer disclaimers when you're teaching them the bullshit parts, but that's really hard to implement. Or you could just cave and do what Ryan Walters wants you to do and make your kids dumber. I mean, that's what Republicans want. But none of those are good options if you were a public school. So here's some good news. And this is why I wanted to bring this up. Because after all this, the Oklahoma Supreme Court has just stepped in to weigh in on this. This week, the Oklahoma Supreme Court voted 5-2 to put a temporary block on the Ryan Walters 2024 bullshit social studies standards, at least while one of the lawsuits, the Americans United one, while that lawsuit makes its way through the legal system, they are blocking Ryan Walters' plan from going into action. And I want to show this to you right over here. It's a very short decision, but you can see there's the lawsuit against Ryan Walters. And look at this. This is it. It's 2 pages. And let's go through this line by line because it's very short. The petitioners, Americans United and the families they represent, challenge the validity of the 2025 standards for social studies. The court assumes original jurisdiction, blah, blah, blah. So look at this. No further action shall be taken and no public funds shall be spent by Oklahoma, by the State Board of Education or the Department of Education to enforce or implement the 2025 standards pending further order of this court. Let's stop there for a second. Here's what you need to know about that. The Oklahoma legislature had already allocated $33 million toward implementing the Ryan Walters bullshit agenda. And what does that money go toward? Creating new tests, conducting trainings for teachers so they know what has changed, purchasing textbooks. They allocated $33 million for everyone in the state to do all that stuff. The Supreme Court is saying, nope, do not spend any money on this thing. What else did they say? Respondents shall treat the 2019 standards as the applicable academic standards for now. So basically, hey, schools, you're wondering what you should do right now? Do what you were doing last year. That's what we are telling you to do. Use the 2019 standards until we decide to weigh in for real. And that is great news too, because those standards were generally fine. Also important is the fact that the Oklahoma Supreme Court says we are going to deal with this directly. We're not going to wait for lower courts to weigh in on this before we step in. Like, this is too important. We're just going to deal with this as soon as we can. I should tell you, that's a 5-2 decision. 2 of the Supreme Court justices said we're recusing ourselves. I don't know why, but they're not weighing in on this. And one of the judges who dissented, he said, I just think lower courts should hear this case first before we weigh in. But in general, the majority of the Supreme Court, the majority of this Republican-appointed Oklahoma Supreme Court is like, yeah, these Ryan Walters bullshit standards, let's pause those because you got some issues. And while we write up a decision here, everyone else go back to actually teaching your kids instead of indoctrinating them. Now, what was Ryan Walters' reaction to all this? Oh, he's big mad. This is what he said in a statement this week. Here we go. State School Superintendent Ryan Walters, who strongly pushed for adoption of these standards, said in a statement issued after the ruling that the court is embarrassing and clearly is out of step with Oklahomans. They're like all Republicans on the court, and they're not out of step with Oklahomans because I think even Oklahomans, even Republicans in Oklahoma, kind of want their kids not to be dumb. They are ignoring the fact that in other states, the Bible is openly taught as the cornerstone of Western civilization. That is not a thing taught in other states. You know how I know that? Because Oklahoma is ranked like 49 or 50 in the nation when it comes to education, and other states are all better than that. And that's one of the reasons. What else did Walter say? Christianity, American exceptionalism, and conservative values are under attack, and the Oklahoma Supreme Court is leading the assault, which is just dumb. No one thinks the Republican Supreme Court in Oklahoma is going after conservative values and Christianity. Ryan Walters is mad because someone stopped him from doing the illegal thing and the dumb thing. And he's just like, well, that must mean you're against Christians. No, they're against guys who break the law and want to make people dumber. I think he's mad at the Supreme Court in Oklahoma because it's the same court that shot down his plan to have a taxpayer-funded religious charter school. And like the Oklahoma Supreme Court voted 7-1, you can't do that. It violates our Constitution. And then he bumped it up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they were split. So they didn't weigh in on it at all. So I think Ryan Walters is just pissed off at the Supreme Court for not giving him everything he wants. So the bottom line right now, students are going to be better off because the guy who runs education in their state and wants to make them dumb was thwarted yet again. I will tell you, I told you there were 2 lawsuits against these standards. One of them is the one the Supreme Court is referencing. The second lawsuit was actually tossed out by a lower court judge, but that ruling has been appealed. We're waiting for that, to see how that one plays out too, but it's separate from this. I think this whole story is about whether Oklahoma will allow its public schools to be turned into indoctrination camps for Christian nationalism and political disinformation, because that's what Walters wants to do. He wants to erase systemic racism, spread right-wing lies, and elevate the Bible as if that's what the founders were reading when they were writing the Constitution. None of that is true. It's never about education for him. This is a guy who, Ryan Walters is a guy who said the Tulsa race massacre wasn't really about race. Like, this guy wants to keep everyone as dumb as he is. And Oklahoma, by the way, is already struggling with underfunded schools and teacher shortages and poor educational outcomes. And we already saw Ryan Walters try to make things worse with the teacher shortages when he's like, oh, if you're coming from California, you have to take this test which, as I said in another video, that's not a test. It's just a publicity stunt from PragerU. He wanted to like weed out woke teachers. Just this week, Ryan Walters sent a memo to principals, administrators, teachers across the state saying, if you dare say anything mean about Charlie Kirk, I'm going to fire you. Because Ryan Walters is always looking for reasons to fire teachers if they don't love him personally. So again, if I have to give some credit to the Oklahoma Supreme Court here, because they have once again stepped in to save Oklahoma voters from the consequences of their stupid votes. Because Ryan Walters was elected to this position that he's in right now. I don't know. Part of me, a really just depressing side of me is like, you know what? Let them do whatever Ryan Walters wants them to do. Let those voters suffer. Let Ryan Walters control their education system, do the religious indoctrination thing. Those kids will pay the price for it. And those parents will, I told you so in due time. But also, unlike Ryan Walters, I actually care about the kids in Oklahoma and I want them to have the opportunities to succeed. That's why I don't want him running their education system. I just wish he had the same commitment to those students that I do. Like, the guy running their education system should care a little bit about the kids, and he doesn't. Everything he does is about stroking his own ego or stroking something else if he's watching the Jackie Chan movie. Anyway. All right, I'm done with this story. What else we got here? Why are you all talking about pizza? When is his term up? Will Oklahomans reelect him? I believe he's up for reelection next year. I don't know yet if Ryan Walters has announced he hasn't. I wonder if Ryan Walters is going to announce a run to be governor. Because, the only way to go here is up if you're him. If you're a Republican, you can only fail upwards. So the fact that he sucks at his job means he's obviously going to run for higher office, but he hasn't announced that yet. There is a Democrat who is running for superintendent of public instruction who's fine, as far as I can tell. But I don't know if he's actually going to run for this job again. But I think he's up for re-election next year. I sort of feel like anyone who voted in favor of that bait and switch instead of against it ought to be fired. That can't be legal, right? You're talking about the school board that voted for those standards. And again, I don't know how much blame to cast on them because they already knew what those standards were like beforehand. And I don't know how they were going to vote on those standards, but Ryan Walters is like, you need to approve this now. And I think they just felt, why would he lie to us? So they just approved because he said so, not because they are dumb, but because they honestly felt this is the right thing to do for the schools. I don't know. I don't know enough about them to give them the benefit of the doubt here, but no, you can't fire them for that reason. And it would be a lot of work to try to get these state-appointed representatives off those roles. So this is an Oklahoma Supreme Court shadow docket item. I don't think it's a shadow docket item. I think they're basically saying, look, we're going to weigh in on this. But for now, because school started, so teachers need to know what to do, we're going to really quickly step in to say, don't use the new version, use the old version. And while we sort through all this, when it's time, we will issue a real decision on this. So it's not shadow docket. But in the meantime, don't use the new version. We'll get back to you. And that's okay. That's okay for a court to do. We've also seen that sort of thing happen with the 10 Commandments in schools laws in a couple states where the courts have weighed in and say, they've told schools, do not put the 10 Commandments up on your walls. I will get back to you soon with a ruling on this for real. Remind me where the phrase Judeo-Christian came about and from who. I feel like that phrase has been around for a while, but basically Christian nationalists have hijacked it as a way of saying our country was founded not on Christianity or the Bible, you guys. That would be like injecting religion in schools. No, it's just our Judeo-Christian heritage. That sounds more inclusive. So I don't know where the phrase originated, but I do know Christian nationalists have taken that term and they try to use it to soften the blow when they try to inject their religion into government and the public school system by way of tradition. Everything is Judeo-Christian tradition when it really is just whatever conservative Christians want. But it sounds better if you say Judeo-Christian tradition. You just asked, maybe rhetorically, about the origin of the term. It came about during the Red Scare, really, in an attempt to unite Americans to oppose atheistic communism. So if that's true, we're talking about the 1950s when they put in God We Trust on the money and they put under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. Around that time, when they tried to make religious values try to be a tradition thing, and they injected into all of the money and the pledge and things like that, and our motto became In God We Trust. I would not be surprised if that's true then. So thank you for that answer. 1930s, Joe says. I'm just jumping in here. 1930s. That is earlier than I anticipated, but okay, I'll take your word on that.